We are back. Welcome to the Leadership Launchpad Project. I'm Rob Kalwarowsky, and as always, the yang to my yin, Susan Hobson's here. Susan, how are you?
I am excellent. I am fabulous. I'm firing on all cylinders, so watch out now. You know what that means.
It means uh-oh.
I got a lot of energy in the tank today. Let's just say that.
Absolutely. And I mean, obviously, we start off with a quote. And so I have one here from Joseph Campbell because I know we're going to talk to Tony a little bit about what they've got going on at the Energy Project. And obviously, Joseph Campbell is the person who worked on or invented the hero's journey. And he says, the journey of the hero is about the courage to seek the depths, the image of creative rebirth, the eternal cycle of change within us, the uncanny discovery that the seeker is the mystery which the seeker seeks to know. And we always talk about the journey. And with that quote, we have an incredible human, the CEO and founder of the Energy Project. Tony Schwartz is with us. Tony, how are you?
I'm good. More important, how are you? I know you've moved and you're in a totally new place. What's it like in Costa Rica?
Yeah, I mean, for folks who are listening in the background, there are birds, and I've been asked literally at every call for the last few weeks about how about those tropical birds behind you?
That's my favorite part. My favorite part.
Yeah, it's been amazing. And I mean, the wildlife here is incredible. We have toucans in the tree over there. We have birds nesting on the front porch.
Wow.
Yeah, the species of birds. I mean, we have vultures in a tree that are just around the corner, which you can see from here, which are incredible. Yeah, I saw a hummingbird this morning sitting on the porch when I was having my coffee. So it's a wildly different thing. And yeah, it's been an incredible journey to get here. And I mean, part of that journey is that willingness to, well, the depths were sort of thrust upon me, but it's about going deeper and figuring out like who we truly are and bringing it back to the folks that are in our communities. And Tony, obviously, you know some of that because we met at a retreat together. And so maybe let's start there. Like Tony, obviously the folks are going to be new to you. So let's tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, well, for the purposes of this podcast, there's obviously many things I could say about who I am after all these many years of being me. But for today's purposes, for the last 20 plus years, I've run this company called the Energy Project. And the Energy Project was founded on the principle that in order for you to be fully fueled, you need to draw on four reservoirs of energy: physical, which is the quantity of your energy; emotional, which is the quality of your energy; mental, which is the focus of your energy; and spiritual, which is the purpose to which you put your energy, or the energy derived from a higher sense of purpose. Call it either one. And the notion, which grew out of work that we did originally with professional athletes, was that people in a world of constantly increasing demand were beginning to run on empty. Now, the years have passed and they're running emptier than they ever did. But I think one of the things we discovered along the way is that most people don't draw on all of the four critical sources of energy they require to be the best that they can be. So we've done that work in large organizations for 20 years now, 21 years. And it has been really an incredible journey because we're going into people, and it really was conceived subversively, or it was conceived to be subversive in the sense that in order to interest CEOs in what I was really interested in, we had to mask it to some extent. And we masked it behind the mask we wore was, we are experts in high performance. And we had good evidence based on this work we'd done with athletes. I could have cared less about high performance. I mean, I think it's great, better to be a high performer than a low performer. But it wasn't the depths, as you quoted Campbell saying, were much more interesting to me than the outcome per se. And the incredible part of the journey has been the degree to which in very traditional organizations, huge organizations, whether it's Google or Coca-Cola or a Merck, or I mean, I could go on and on and on. We've actually infiltrated their thinking. And most of all, they're thinking about what's the role of what's the value of addressing the inner life, of addressing what's going on inside people, on the assumption that how they feel inside is profoundly influencing how they show up on the outside.
So when you talk about the last 20 years since the inception of the Energy Project, you said something there I want to circle back to. You said that in all these years of doing this work, in some ways we're more deficit than we've ever been. Why is that? That's something Rob and I are really trying to crack wide open and explore with our audience, especially, right? Like, we're talking about how burnout's the most rampant it's ever been. What's up with that? We're in the information era, right? And you have people like us all over the damn place trying to preach about these things and these tools and these strategies and these concepts. So why is it that we're more deficit than we've ever been?
Yeah. So if I ask somebody today, or the last 5 years, as you look back at them, are they has the demand significantly increased in your life? It'll be 99% of folks will say yes. And I'll say, well, if you anticipate or you look out over the next 5 years, how many of you think that notwithstanding how high the demand's been, it's going to get still higher? Again, 99% yes. And then I'll say, okay, so here's the $64,000 question. If demand is as high as it's ever been and it's only going to get higher, how many of you believe that your capacity to meet that demand is going to rise on a straight line with the demand?
Great.
Zero.
I'm just hoping for a clone or an AI that's me.
That's his humor.
That too, but then you get all the other stuff too, Rob. So I don't know if that's what you want. Be careful. Be careful.
Right? Thank you. I concur.
Yeah, but the idea is that we have taken capacity for granted forever. Why? Well, so first of all, what is capacity? Capacity is the fuel in your tank. It's what makes it possible to bring your skill and talent to life in the crucible of demand.
Love it.
So as long as you have enough capacity, why would you think about capacity? Now, all of a sudden, the world begins to speed up. And we saw this, I would say, one of the big turning points in the years I've been doing this work is built around the digital life. And the idea that we went from, leaving work, and if you were on the bus riding home, you either read a book or you listened to a song on the radio. Those are your choices. Or you sat there and to now we've got 600 choices 24 hours a day, and we sleep with our devices, and the first thing we do when we wake up is look at them. So that alone as a measure of demand is so exceptional. And then I think the failure to think about capacity, everything catches up with you. Karma's a bitch, baby.
Oh, yeah.
And it's caught up with us. And so the degree to which, just think about it again in energy terms, the degree to which, how many years do you say to yourself, how many of us grew up saying, well, if it's hot in this house, if it's cold in this house, I'll just turn up the heat. And if it's too hot outside, I'll just turn up the air conditioning, without any regard to the idea that these fossil fuels are not renewable resources. So eventually you do hit that day of reckoning. We've hit it. I feel it today as we're speaking more than I have ever felt it. It feels to me like the center cannot hold.
Wow.
That we have gone so far with climate, with the unleashing of people's worst instincts. We'll end up talking about parts, the unleashing of people's most destructive parts, with the tremendous disparity between the rich and the rest of the world, and the anger and hatred that has catalyzed, that we are at a really grim moment. And I remember I wrote a book in 1975, I published it, called What? No, I guess it was 1985. Sorry, 1985. It's all a long time ago.
That's okay.
Called What Really Matters: Searching for Wisdom in America.
Wow.
And I thought, I went around and talked to all of the people in sort of the consciousness and New Age world to try to distill out, is there a wisdom tradition unique to the West and to America? And I remember meeting Ram Dass during that period, and his saying, and one of the very first sort of memorable things that someone said to me as I was starting to report this book, things are getting crazy, and we're going to need people who can stay calm in the storm. And you are two of those people who we need, given what you're doing. I'm one of those people, given what I'm doing. But the number of people, percentage of people who understand, A, that what's going on inside, you better address, or it's going to address your life for you. And B, have the courage to do that, is very small. So I feel a sense of purpose that is greater than ever, because, job number one in this world is to regulate your nervous system. Nothing else is possible if your nervous system is dysregulated. And whose nervous system isn't dysregulated right now?
Right, exactly. That's the point. That's the damn point. Yeah. And I'm surprised, in all of that reflection, and I know Rob has a question for you, but I'm surprised, none of what you referenced had anything to do with the pandemic. Right? Because when we ask experts about this question on this show, that's where our experts refer, right? It's we've never been under more stress. This was so traumatic for everybody. It was a collective experience of trauma, those are the things that we're hearing about in terms of why.
All those other people were on the show saying that, so I didn't have to.
Yeah.
Having said that, of course, that's a big factor.
Yeah.
And in some ways, that's the healthiest thing that's happened to us, because it is a wake-up call.
Ooh,
it was for many people. I mean,
amen.
It passes into memory too quickly when it seems to be over. But to wake people up to the core question that actually the work that I'm doing now most addresses, to wake people up to the idea that it's time for a reckoning. What you've taken for granted, what you've accepted. I love to ask people the question, is the life you're living worth the price you're paying to live it?
Oh,
and, that's really the reckoning.
Yeah.
Why are you the way you are? And what do you really want? Or who do you really want to be? Those questions get drowned in busyness and in
nonsense, distraction, and then avoidance. What were you going to say there a second ago, Rob?
I mean, that's where I want to go to you, Tony, right? Like you said that there's a lot of folks who lack courage to face themselves or to look at their experience in the mirror. And I was totally that until I had to look at it. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. And I guess for you, Tony, it's like, how do you put folks on the call to courage, or how do you get folks over that hump to get them to start looking at their inner experience?
Mm-hmm.
That's a great question. I mean, that's such an important question, because we need a heck of a lot more people to be doing it than are doing it right now.
Amen.
Rob, first of all, you answered the question in part, which is pain. When the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of making the change, people begin to make change. And I think that did happen to some significant extent during COVID. Mm-hmm. But I have found that, my particular calling and the calling of this organization that I run is built around the idea that actually how you speak to people, which means the degree to which you can meet them where they are while still taking them a step, 2 steps, 5 steps beyond. That's the center of what I think we do best. My background was in the first 20 years of my career was as a journalist and a writer. And, my particular writing skill, I think, was very focused on clarity and simplicity, and really being able to say exactly either what I felt or what others were feeling in a way that met people, that people could connect with. So a lot of the answer to your question about what do you do to get people over the hump is that you find a language that makes sense to them. You find a connection point. You don't impose it on them. You don't tell them. You don't ask them to come up spontaneously with the answer. You give them basically an inviting dinner to attend, and some percentage of those people, and it's higher than I would have imagined when I started doing this work, will respond to it. We'll talk at some point, I know, about IFS and about the whole idea of multiple selves, but I'll just do a little preview of it. You've probably done shows on this, and a lot of your listeners are already aware of internal family systems, but this core idea that we are really moving between 3 separate selves: a child self, which IFS calls the exile, but we at the Energy Project call it the child. Why? Because the child is immediately accessible to people. Mm-hmm. The exile's a little less clear. And I don't say that critically, but what we're trying to do is, how do I get you to understand instantly? So if I say to you, the most defenseless part of you, the most vulnerable part of you is the child, boom, you get it. Yes, of course, right.
Makes sense.
We then call what IFS calls the protector, we call the defender, because the defender has got a little bit more juice in it. It's got a little bit more intensity to it. Mm-hmm. And this is what I wanted to say. And of course, the third of those selves is the core self, the true self, the self with a capital S. It's who, at your most essential, you actually are. Very little of which you access, or most of us access, through most of our lives. But just staying on this defender for a moment, one of the things we've learned is that in this audience that I go to, which is very senior leaders who have done very, very little internal work, often none, and are somewhat averse to it or resisting it. I don't want to go there. Mm-hmm. When I say, hey, so there are these 3 selves, I start to explain them in the way I just did with you guys just now, and I get to the defender, and I say, well, the defender appears to protect and defend the child, to defend the most vulnerable part of you. So when you're feeling stressed, when you're feeling devalued, when you're feeling overwhelmed, what defender comes up for you, or what defenders come up for you? And I say that to the CEO of a Fortune 100 company
Yeah.
who's probably never used the word defender in his life for any other reason than say, we're going to fucking defend this to the end. And they're like, oh yeah, that's that part of me that just like wants to hide away. Or, yeah, that's that part of me. I look at it and it goes nuts and it starts screaming at people.
Mhm.
So the point I'm making about all of this is that in the language, because I'm tying this back to your question, what is it that you do to bring people in? You find the pieces that people go, oh yeah, I got it. You don't have to explain that more to me. I know. And that's my experience, that when we introduce something like the Defender, people get it.
And that leads to curiosity, or take me the next step of
Absolutely.
depth in terms of, because
Absolutely.
I feel like we get that, but I want to make sure the people listening in our audience get that, right? It's like why we say that self-awareness is the mother of all skill. It's the entry point.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So see more to be more. You know, you cannot change what you do not notice, but noticing can change everything. So that's just a rephrase of what you just said.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, I think whenever you give someone something that feels intuitively right, curiosity is a natural reaction because we're hungry for authentic experiences. We're hungry for a little bit of visibility into what's standing in our way.
Mm-hmm.
And most of what you get is such crap. You know, it's so superficial or it's so half true that we're used to settling for not much. So, you know, to get little pieces of moments of wisdom is a tremendous agent of potential change.
So you're just awakening that.
It is about awakening, isn't it? I mean,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you know, you think about this. I started earlier with this. You think about the idea that we grow up and over time, out of the completely natural and understandable instinct to develop an identity and to feel safe, we begin to coalesce around a set of beliefs about how the world works. And then we begin to develop biases. They're out of the comparison mode, like better than, less than is so indeed intrinsic to our experience as a way to understand. So you start to say, well, I like that one, but not that one. It might be, I like white, not black, or black, not white. It might be female, male. It might be, you know, heterosexual, homosexual. It might be tall, short. All these different ways that we begin to separate, but these biases go underground in the sense that we become unconscious. They're just part of who we are, what we assume is true.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the fixed habits that get locked in over time. You just do something over and over again, and it becomes automatic, and you hit that rut in the road and you go right into the rut because that's where the rut was created. That's how the habit was created. So you've got biases, you've got beliefs, you've got habits, you've got fears, you've got a confirmation bias. So that's the point at which you start to say, well, I'm only going to look for evidence of what I already believe because I want to feel safe. So we cut out all this stuff. All of this is going on inside us, and we're not seeing it. And all of it is creating walls and dams and obstructions that stand in the way of the free flow of energy, the free flow of emotional energy, of physical energy, of the energy of focus and spiritual energy, the energy of purpose. All of those things that are going on inside us that we're not noticing are closing the system down. They're making the system smaller. Because you're either expanding or you're contracting. Like we are dynamic creatures. So it's like Eldridge Cleaver once said, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. It's the same notion. How much paying attention to all of the things that arise in you that are oriented to defense versus growth. Defense versus growth, right? Because here's what's interesting about that. If you spend $100 million as the Defense Department on weapons, that's exactly $100 million not available for growth. In other words, it's a zero-sum game. So to whatever extent we are spending our energy in protection, defense, it means we are subverting our ability to grow. Now, look, if there's a lion over 10 feet from us and it's growling and it's going to come toward us, great. You want the defense system up and working. So you either run like hell or you figure out a way to kill the lion. But there aren't many real lions coming at us.
That's the truth.
And yet we live our lives as if they are. So defense versus growth, it's another way of sort of thinking about what is our possibility.
I love that, Tony. And I mean, here's something. So obviously you run one of your flagship programs is called The Reckoning. And you have a quote on your website, which I love. It says, to become a transformational leader in a fiercely complex world, you must first become a bigger human being. This means expanding your mind, opening your heart, and trusting your body. So, first off, you sort of gave us some definitions on becoming a bigger human being, but can you elaborate on that for us?
Yeah, I'll take it back to what I was saying a few minutes ago about the better than, less than way in which we see the world. Because that way of seeing the world is a binary way. So if you're not better than, you're less than, which becomes a compelling reason to try to be better than. Of course, the minute you become better than, you're constantly at risk of falling off that level and being less than. The real shift in becoming a bigger human being is literally that. It's how much can you see? So it's not better than, less than. It's actually the notion that the more fully you can embrace all of who you are, the less you have to defend. And that's a really fascinating notion. So I say, and this is really part of my own personal journey, was I woke up, this is almost literally one of those origin stories, so maybe it's not remembered quite accurately, but you'll see why I want to tell it. So I woke up one morning and I had, pretty much cognitively, as opposed to, I felt experience, but I had this idea, all the worst things that people have ever said about me or that I've said about myself are not only true, they're way worse than I can bear to allow myself to see. But they're not all that's true. I'm more than that. I'm that, and I'm more than that. And so when you begin to embrace a more integrative perspective, one that actually recognizes that no virtue is a virtue by itself. So what do I mean by that? I mean that we think of candor as a virtue. And in a binary world, where the opposite of candor is dishonesty, of course we say candor is a virtue. But if you overuse candor, what do you get?
Over transparency, right? Like where people are sharing a little too much, shall we say?
Yeah, that would be one. And then cruelty.
Yeah.
Because
yeah, social decency.
Candor overused becomes cruelty unless it's mediated by care or compassion. So it's not actually care or compassion that's a virtue in and of itself, nor is it candor. It's the capacity to move dynamically between these poles or extremes, polarities, in appropriate response to the demands of the situation. But in between those polarities is a whole rich world that's complex, and some of it ends up being painful, and some of it ends up being joyful, and all of it is part of being human. So it goes back to my idea, to my suggestion that when you can embrace all of who you are, you have nothing left to defend. And when you have nothing left to defend, you're in a position to grow. When you're in full out defense mode, you cannot grow. You can't move, to go back to the Joseph Campbell quote, you can't move to depths when you are racing across the landscape at 100 miles an hour. You need to actually align with the rhythms of the human body. What are the rhythms of the human body? Every system in the body operates best when it pulses. So your heart rate's meant to go up in the face of a demand and then relax back into a resting heart. Your muscles should contract to get something done and then relax, not go into spasm, not cause back pain. So you want to do this. You want to breathe in, but you don't get credit for just being good at breathing in, right? So this idea that we live in a rhythmic universe, and that means in all ways we do that. So you do it, meaning sometimes you are fully fueled and then you start to burn the energy down in order to get stuff done, and then you have to refuel it. Sometimes you are in a state of joy or happiness, but stuff happens and you go down. But can you go down? This is back to the very first thing I said. When you start to fall off the cliff, can you re-equilibrate? Can you quiet the nervous system? Because the body will do this very naturally, just like you would see if you went into a hospital room and let's say a intensive care unit and you looked at the EKG monitor. If what you saw was this, the patient's doing fine, right? The flatter it gets, the more one-dimensional it gets, the more continuous it gets, the sicker you are. How about that?
This is pulling from the science of periodization, right? And peak state. That's
absolutely, because yes, good for you, because we started with athletes, and athletes are geniuses at managing work, rest, recoveries. In other words, they periodize their training. They train intensely, but then they take time off. So if you have a marathon runner, you don't run 26 miles on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and then run the marathon on Thursday.
No,
you taper down.
Hopefully not. Most athletes struggle with the discipline around recovery, but I think the higher you climb, going back to that whole piece around the demands and the capacity, you just learn to respect the recovery so much because it's a science. You see, you don't have the capacity to give it if you skip the rest and recovery stage, right?
Well, but I love that. Yeah.
I was just going to say, but
that's part of our work.
It does not translate into life and work, though, does it? And that's
totally translates. No, it totally translates. So I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
So I am obsessed, among other things. You can see I'm sort of leaning in that direction anyway, but I'm obsessed with the power and value of renewal, partly because my own addictive tendency is toward workaholism. So I started the Energy Project in significant part, to help me deal with the false belief that more, bigger, faster is always better.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm still in the struggle. But what I would say about great athletes is that what they understand is that it's the recovery, the refueling of their energy is actually as important to their performance as the expenditure of energy.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
That's the paradigm shift. You've got it. That's the paradigm shift that is the hardest for organizations to get.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you were saying, well, it doesn't work to do renewal in the workplace, does it? Not with the belief system that holds so tight to the idea that more, bigger, faster is better. But, I just did a session with my current open enrollment cohort of the Reckoning. So, 15 leaders. And in the middle, it was 2 days, this particular piece of it. And in the middle of the day, we had lined up teddy bears on a shelf on one side of the room. And in the middle of the day, I handed out all the teddy bears. And I said, it's like 2:00, 2:30. And I said, we're going to take a nap. Oh. And I said, and by the way, there will be cookies and milk afterward. And if you need a blankie, we'll give you a blankie. And here's a yoga mat for you to lie down on. And it was so interesting. They looked at me like I was nuts.
Crazy, yeah.
Several of them said, well, I'm not doing, like, you mean you want me to go and lie down in my regular clothes on the floor there? And I said, yeah, you don't have to. I said, like, there's chairs out there. Go in the chair and just, do as close to a nap as you can. So about 3 minutes go by, and I'm thinking to myself, because my partner in this was saying, are you crazy? Like, they're going to hate that. And I'm feeling a little nervous because people are leaving the room. And I come back 3 or 4 minutes later, every single person is back in the room. They're all on the floor. And within 10 minutes, half of them are snoring. And we do it for, say, 20 or 25. They get up. I say, how was that? Because we get them up before they've fallen into deep sleep, before 20 minutes hits. Yeah. Now, most of them haven't fallen asleep. Most of them have just rested, which I told them is fine. And I said, okay, what I want you to do is to evaluate. Oh, I told them going into this, give me the quantity of your energy on a scale from 1 to 10 right now, 2:30 in the afternoon. Give me the quality of your energy from negative to positive on a scale 1 to 10. Now they're back. We're talking a little bit. And I said, okay, now I want to know your energy on a scale of 1 to 10 for those two things. It's gone up dramatically. And then at the end of the day, so that's 3 hours later, I say to them, so what do you think about the nap? Oh my God, it was transforming. I was totally alert. I was so engaged. I'm usually exhausted at that time of day. So back to you, Susan, yes, it does work in the workplace. You can, if you become skillful at managing your energy, get more done in less time at a higher level of focus and quality in a much more sustainable way. You just have to believe that that period during which you are, quote, not doing is not the same as slacking. It's called recovering or renewing or refueling. So it's just a whole different way of looking at your life. Now, you do this work enough, because we also know that you sleep in a 90-minute cycle. You go through 4 stages of sleep from light to deep. In 4 or 5 90-minute cycles, you're going to get a good night's sleep. Turns out the same pattern recapitulates itself during the day, and you move from high alertness when we started this time together. Now, I've certainly been very intensely involved, and I felt I feel like you're very much with me. We're at, I don't know exactly where we are. I'd guess about 50 minutes. Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Good guess.
See, my body clock is unbelievable about this. I know
say.
exactly where I am. And when I'm in a room facilitating at an hour and 15 minutes or an hour and 20 minutes, because of this 90-minute cycle, I know must take a break. My body is screaming at me. And it's screaming at all of us. We just override it. We override it with, caffeine and sugar and adrenaline and cortisol and noradrenaline.
All of it.
It's funny because when we were at the retreat together, Tony and I were basically, we were on schedule taking breaks together.
Yeah.
And there was about four
Those
of
were
us.
compelled.
Everyone else was just hammered in there.
Calibration is a part of the self-awareness work, right? Like when you're in tune to your state to that degree subconsciously where you're not even having to track it, right? It's just you're calibrating it. Yeah.
And that's why, by the way, that's why the body is becoming so much an object of greater attention in work around trauma, but just generally in developmental work and growth work, because it's a much truer barometer of how you're doing. So when you can tune into your body, I myself spent, I think, 112 years in therapy, talk therapy. It wasn't quite that many. But the point is, I spent many, many years talking to somebody while sitting in a chair and the other person's over there listening. And I had many, many brilliant insights about why I was the way I was, and nothing changed. Nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, year after year after year. And then I started doing work somatically and IFS work all in the last few years. And I'm 70 years old, so I've been at this a long time. And I got more in the last 5 years in terms of transformation than in the previous 50.
Wow. Look at that testimony. That's the number one thing I calibrated. And then Rob, you go. But like my clients, my process started out really NLP driven. And I had such respect for neurolinguistic programming, having been a professional athlete, right? Because I'm like, oh yeah, state, that makes sense to me, right? Like needs being met as a performance driving strategy. Oh yeah, that totally makes sense to me. I get that, right? But I think that's the feedback. That's how I knew. I was like, because I had been schooled in psychology and all of sociology and all that in my undergrad. But when my clients would say, I got more out of this session than 10 years of therapy, I'd be like, really? Like, what is this? But it's because of the understanding of the state, right? It's getting out of the intellectualization of it and down into the embodiment of the change and the integration of the change that really, for me, it's like, if you're in a change process, please be looking for that in terms of the leader that's taken you through that journey. But yeah, that's important.
That's great to hear. And I love the idea that, I mean, you're capturing it exactly, that, my body, this is no great insight, but my body always knows. So, I'll give you an example. Over the years, I've hired lots and lots of people for the organization I run. And in every single case where I was considering a candidate and I was saying to myself something like, yeah, I'm looking at the credentials and like they've got this and this and this, and I should hire them. And my body was saying, something's just not right. I never was successful hiring that person. Like it always turned out to be a bad decision. Now, that's dangerous because you can go to your body's impulses and just be reactive. But again, if your nervous system is quiet and you are not in a reactive state, your body is a fabulous barometer for whether something makes sense for you. Which brings me to the one other thing I want to make sure to get in before the end of this, and that is to go back to IFS, because I think for me, see more to be more, embracing all of who you are, that awareness journey that you're talking about around the things that are you're not seeing, that seeing gives you more power to influence, is one component of what I think is transformational. And it is the first. You can't change what you don't notice. The body, as one of the four sources of intelligence that is most undervalued, is a second territory to work in transformation. I said four centers of intelligence. So they're aligned with the four sources of energy. So there's the intelligence of the mind, cognitive, which we all know and is the one most of us rely most on. There's the intelligence of the heart, emotional
intelligence. Mm-hmm.
Emotional intelligence. There's the intelligence of the body, and there's the intelligence of the spirit. So this ability to regularly refuel yourself so that you can, in all four dimensions, so that you can draw on all four of those sources of intelligence, not choose up sides between them.
Mm-hmm.
It's the second piece of a transformative journey. And the third piece, I feel, is embodied in Dick Schwartz's work in internal family systems. And so I obviously not going to have time to say much more about it, and I did say something at the beginning, but the simple recognition, a couple recognitions that are deeply, deeply brilliant that Dick had. One is, we're not a single self. So in a binary world, we walk around thinking, whatever I'm feeling and thinking, that's me.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm angry, then that's me. If I'm joyful, that's me. In reality, it turns out we do have these multiple selves, and they make all kinds of sense. We have this vulnerable child that is truly vulnerable and does, in the face of a dangerous world, need defenders. The defenders that come along, and I've been doing this, Rob, you'll appreciate this particularly, but maybe perhaps both of you, if you're both into IFS. Mm-hmm. But I've been saying to people in these courses with these executives, I've been saying to them, okay, so tell me about your defender. And they'll start talking about a defender. And then I'll say, how old is that defender? And almost invariably, the answer falls between 9 and 11. Now, there's no science and law in this, but the point is, it's a child in grown-up's clothing. That's the defender. It comes along to try to do something for you because it doesn't have adult resources when you're 9 years old. Mm-hmm. Or if it does, you have no idea how to access them. So it comes along and does the best it can. And it makes a mash of it, but it's trying to protect that child. So the other piece that has been for me so profoundly transformative is discovering that there actually is another self that can run the show. That we do have a core self whose value is never at risk. And I say that because as soon as your value is at risk, you go into defense mode. But if you are drawing on a self whose value is not conditional, the self knows its value, doesn't ever think about it, then the self is oriented to growth. The self is oriented to care, to compassion. And I cannot say, though I would love to be able to say this, that I have consistent and regular access to this self, but I have some. And I know it exists. And I know that when I'm in it, I'm a me that I like much better and that other people like much better.
I feel like you were in this capital S self today. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I definitely feel like that's a part of your flow showing up on this mic right now.
Well, I think that's true. And this is a safe space in which to have it happen. You know, you're interested. I know you're on a similar wavelength. Mm-hmm. I love the impact of sharing these ideas So if you think of it from the four centers of intelligence, that's drawing on spiritual energy. The energy of the heart is to share as, a loving gesture.
Yep.
Doing it just energizes me physically.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm used to using my mind. So yeah.
We're in alignment. I can feel it. Right, Rob?
Totally. And Tony, when you were talking about hiring folks and that feeling you get, like obviously you know this, but when we had Dick on the show, he said, you're in self when you feel it. And it's that feeling that you're getting at, which is, I don't need to have this protection or defenders running. I can just be. And that's you on the other side of this mic saying the same thing, right? And being you. And there's no agenda. Yeah. There's no Tony has to, be important or this or that, right? It's just you sharing all the knowledge and wisdom you've gained, just being there. And that's for folks out there.
Without having as you say, without having an agenda. Like it does not, I don't have to have 12 people or 200 people stand up and applaud in order to feel the same feeling. I was thinking, Susan, given your athletic background, one of the other ways that I find, and you probably use this in your own practice, but to communicate the experience of self is just flow. So the idea of being in flow, when, we're that wonderful place between boredom and anxiety where you're neither out of it nor are you overactivated, but where you're just one with the experience. Uh-huh. And, as soon as you try to put a name to it, it's gone.
But that's what I loved about sports, right, buddy? That's where him and I really made this connection and found this alignment.
I didn't know this. So you guys are both have an athletic background?
Yeah, he was a national polo player and played at MIT for 4 years. And mine was ice hockey. Yeah.
Wow. Two unlikely sports.
Well, hockey's not unlikely from Toronto, but yeah.
Well, it's not in Canada, but it's not basketball and football, in terms of
in the States. Yeah. I know what you meant.
Wow, yeah.
So much to talk about. I feel like we gotta invite you back for a part two. Totally. That's the only way we can land this plane is if we know we can have you back to continue this conversation, because we're just getting started. I can feel that for sure.
Great. Well, thank you so much for having me and for allowing me to fall into self, where I'm very happy to be and hope I spend the rest of the day.
Yeah,
absolutely. Tony, you're amazing. And for folks out there, so we've dropped Tony's LinkedIn in the podcast notes. And if you're interested in learning more about the Energy Project or the Reckoning, head on over to theenergyproject.com. Is there anywhere else you want folks to find you, Tony?
No, they can find the Reckoning on the Energy Project website, but they can also find it on the reckoning.us, I'm even fine if people want to email me, tony@theenergyproject.com. So I think that covers the waterfront, Rob.
And if you walk around the Bronx, you might see Tony walking around. So you can find him there too. Obviously for us, please hit subscribe to Leadership Launchpad Project on your favorite podcast platform and share it with any leaders in your life. If they're looking at defenders, protectors, self, all of the above, shoot it their way. Unlock that awakening for the folks around you. And then if you're interested in leadership development, mindset coaching, and more, head on over to elitehighperformance.com for all of that. Susan, is there anything you want to leave folks with?
It's interesting. What's marinating over here on my end of things? How I'm new to the IFS, thanks to people like you coming into studio, right? And giving us your testimony, and obviously Rob and the experience that he had that was so game changer, I couldn't deny, right? I've been starting to do some of my own IFS exploration, and it's this part of the interview where you talked about how you really were called to this space in and around creating the energy project because you fell on the side of the spectrum known as workaholism. And it's so funny talking about little selves and the protectors that were developed 9 to 11. My father was an incredible workaholic, 7 days a week, family business, and he ran himself into an early grave. And I watched that. He passed away my freshman year at Princeton, actually. And I never have put these dots together because I know what a calling this was for me. When I found these tools and these resources at Princeton, I was like, oh my God, the world needs to know about this. Like us blue collar kids, we don't learn about this stuff, you know? And I was like, there's something here. And I'm a very spiritual person. So I'm like, God, I get it. This is why you put me here. I'm going on my mission to spread this into the world. And even into the blue collar communities, they need to know about this stuff. But I never connected the dots in terms of where that drive and that passion came from so strongly. But I'm definitely going to go into my parts work now, and I'm going to investigate that with my little exiled self, because one of my protectors is my work ethic. And I also gave myself a life-threatening disease because my work ethic is so strong. I developed Crohn's and colitis. Typical overachiever, had to do both, you know. But I just think that something really clicked there for me, like that I've never really connected the dots on in terms of why this is such a purpose-driven mission for me to get out into the world and spread the gospel on state management and how important this is for building our capacity in high performance arenas.
Terrific.
Thank you.
You know, making me think that the next, if we do a next one, we've got to get to the Enneagram. So are you an Enneagram person?
I definitely want to go there, but we have to wrap because I got another person in the queue waiting for me. So
you can throw that last comment out and end with your own lovely piece.
Okay, great. Rob, take it away. Land this plane, buddy.
Absolutely. And I couldn't echo enough what Tony said about feeling, right? And my therapist said to me, there's a common quote in somatic therapy, and it says, does every cell in your body believe it? And that's the delta along this transition, is as you heal, some things will heal faster than others, or your mind will change, but you need to wait and work on your body to catch up. And so for folks out there, another call for some somatic stuff, some body stuff to go along with your mindset. And Susan, we can totally talk about that. I have asked stuff later. Tony, you're a rock star. As soon as I met you, I was like, you're incredible. And I obviously want to talk to you more. So we're going to get you in the queue again. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, guys. Have a great afternoon. Have a great day.
Yo, thank you, Tony. And we're looking forward to sending you out the door in self. Everyone else, thank you so much for listening. And we'll see you all next week.
Bye, everyone.